Wooden Railway Edward presents Thomas and Friends Stories on Sodor, Episode 3 Henry's Heroic Act. Henry is a big green tender engine who lives on the Fat Controller's railway. He has had problems in the past, but still is useful and always strives to do his best. Though this cannot always happen. One late summer night, Henry was outside of Tidmouth, pulling into the sheds after a long day of work. Due to exhaustion, Henry did not realize that he had started backing into the wrong berth in the shed. Gordon, who was residing in the spot Henry was backing into, frantically whistled. "Henry, stop!" warned Gordon, but it was too late. He continued to carelessly back up. His driver could not get him to stop. Gordon's tender smashed up against the back of the shed and he rolled off the track. "Well, I never," huffed Gordon after the dust had settled. "Oh dear, I'm sorry," apologized Henry. He had finally come to a stop. At first, the engines around the turntable found this quite funny. "Well, Gordon, you did say you didn't want to sleep in the sheds tonight," teased Thomas. "And that got the air circulating around here," put in Duck. Gordon was in no mood for jokes. He was halfway out of the shed and badly damaged. But soon it was time for the engines at the sheds to be angry. Numerous equipment had to be used and was quite clamorous indeed. It took late into the night to get Gordon back on the track, and the engines were kept up. Henry sat in a siding and told himself off. "I'm such a silly engine," he sighed. "I've ruined everything." By morning, the engines were restless and also furious with Henry for causing the accident that had triggered their sleepless night. Gordon was maddest of all. "You thoughtless engine, you've kept us all up, and now I can't pull the express today." Henry tried to defend himself, but to no avail. He left the sheds before anyone could say anything else. He backed into a siding off the main line and thought about his situation. A few minutes later, Edward stopped by the track Henry was on to find him sadly looking at the ground. "Henry, I'm sorry about what happened at the sheds. An engine told me all about it. Try to cheer up. Those engines are stuff and nonsense," sympathized Edward. "I guess you're right," murmured Henry, and he said farewell to Edward. Henry was grateful that Edward was still kind to him, but he didn't believe that everything was all right. "Those engines are going to make fun of me for weeks," thought Henry. He slinked away to the yard. His job that day was a mix of taking goods trains and shunting. Usually Henry greatly enjoyed working with trucks, but today it was torture. The trucks had gotten wind of Henry's mishap and had come up with a jingle. Every time Henry came near them, they would sing, "Henry is a joke. He is mistaken. Instead of shunting the coaches, he shunted Gordon." "Quiet," growled Henry. But it was no use. Everywhere he wasn't, the trucks repeated their little song in unison. Finally, after a grueling day of work, Henry came back to Tidmouth, but the engines would not let him in. "Go away, we don't want you here," sneered Thomas. "But I need somewhere to sleep," Henry said, trying to defend himself. "Well, it's not going to be here. I want to sleep tonight." The other engines glared at Henry, and he reluctantly obeyed. He found a cold, dark siding outside of Knapford and unhappily went to sleep. This continued for several more nights, and Henry soon grew tired of this vicious cycle. One morning Henry woke up and felt a little better, but what Henry didn't know is that Gordon was back from the works. He pulled up beside the number 3 engine and taunted him. "Ho, ho, you poor engine! They wouldn't let you in the shed. Well, important engines like myself have work to do. Have fun being lonely," laughed Gordon, and he leashed steam at Henry, which made his paintwork look more black than green. Later that day, Henry was working in the yard when Gordon pompously rode by. This time he didn't even acknowledge Henry and just whistled loudly. The depression was gaining on Henry, and when the manager told him it was time to pull the kipper, not even a hint of a smile could be detected across his face. "Please be on time and try to hurry," the yard manager told Henry. "Gordon is coming with a special passenger excursion, and I want to get you off the main line before he comes." As Henry was making his way to the docks, his driver asked, "You're not excited, old boy? I thought you loved the flying kipper." "Oh, I guess so," said Henry. His mind was on other things. He was running late and knew what was about to come. When Henry arrived at the docks, Cranky was quick to criticize. "You're 7 minutes late. You little excuses of engines ought to learn how to be on time." Cranky angrily dropped his cargo, which caused a great stir. It made Arthur a target. "Ouch!" he exclaimed. "It was Henry's fault," said Cranky hastily. Henry, who was hurt enough, ceased to protest. He coupled to his train and silently hurried away. Since it was so late, few engines were round, and this gave Henry time to think. The sun had now set, and the pace Henry was going at and the smell of fish satisfied him. As Henry approached his destination, he saw a light in the distance. A man waving a red flag stopped Henry. He explained to Henry, his driver, and fireman. "An engine was pulling a late night express and unexpectedly derailed a little farther down the line. You cannot continue." Henry thought this over. "If you need I could help," offered Henry. "Well, okay," said the man, "if you're sure." And he let Henry pass. As the man had said, an engine and their coaches lay in disarray off the track. When Henry got closer, he saw who the engine was. It was Gordon. Henry was startled. "Oh dear, what'll he say? No, I won't pay attention to him. I will just focus on helping him." The passengers said what a bad railway it was. "This railway has an accident every other day," complained one woman. "I've already been in 3 accidents this week alone, and it's only Thursday," added another passenger. "How are we supposed to help him get on the rails?" puzzled Henry's driver. "By the time we get Rocky, it will nearly be dawn, and the passengers will be very cross." I know. Remember when I shunted Gordon off the track? Well, Harvey pulled him up with a strong chain. Maybe we could do the same." Just by chance, Henry's driver and fireman found an old chain by the edge of the track. "It's sort of rusty, but it might work," smiled Henry. Gordon had previously been quiet since he was still prejudiced against Henry, but when the chain was attached to Gordon and he started to pull him and his coaches back on the track, Gordon spoke up. "What are you doing? You're gonna help me after what I've done to you?" There was a moment of awkward silence. "Even if they're not your favorite engine," Henry then directed his eyes toward Gordon's, "you always should help anyone in need. And you're blocking my way, so I needed to move you somehow." Gordon grinned, but just a little bit. "Oh, Henry, I'm sorry. I guess we all make mistakes one time or another. Let's forget that our strange encounter ever happened," proposed Gordon. Henry smiled at Gordon. He could agree with that. "My thoughts exactly." Their friendship had been restored. The passengers got back into the coaches, and they praised Henry for his heroic action. Buffer to buffer, the two allies puffed home.